Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, welcome to a second episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Thursday. I did part one this morning, going to jump into part two. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications of when I post new content. Hit that little bell icon. Music fact of the day. Jimmy Dean, the sausage dude, wasn't just the sausage dude. He was actually a country singer in the 60s and had a few hits. We're going to jump in. I'm hopping on Banfield at 10:30. This will come out after. When we left off, they had just played the audio of the call that Melanie Gibb recorded between her and Lori and Chad. She's still on direct. Lori told Gibb that Tammy was supposed to continue her mission on the other side of the veil and would be okay with Lori and Chad being together. Tammy was designated as a dark entity. Gibb first heard this around September or October, so that would have been shortly before Tammy was murdered. Lori said that Kate and Lori's brother Adam were after her, and their goal was to take away JJ. As far as Chad telling people Tammy was sick, Gibb said he had shared that information publicly at a few conferences that she was going to pass away early. Gibb said she was open to Chad and Lori's ideas, but didn't fully believe them. When Tammy was killed, Gibb reached out to Lori and she said it seemed like Lori already knew, although she did act surprised in the text. Gibb did confirm that Tammy Daybell was suspicious about Chad and Lori. The dark and light theory evolved over time, which included the term zombie. Gibb asked Lori if she really believed the zombie theory, and Lori would say if Chad is Satan, he sure is a good one. Gibb thought that meant that Lori maybe had some doubts about Chad, but on the other hand, Alex Cox 100% all in and believed the zombie theory. She reiterated that Lori would get her information from Chad, and Lori would go to Chad if she had questions. So now we hit cross. Chad and Gibb met in the summer of 2017 at a Preparing a People conference. At those conferences, people share science, stuff about the Book of Mormon. She said evidence of Native Americans, shared visions, ancient scripture. Some talked about the stars. She's been married to David Warwick for 3.5 years. After they got married, they lived together for around 9 months, but currently they live apart. She lives in Arizona. He lives in Utah. Pryor asked the difference between dreams and premonitions. She said a vision is something that you see when you're sleeping, but it's like a live experience, like you're in the dream and it's real. A premonition is a gut feeling about something that just something's going to happen. She said there's nothing wrong with this in mainstream LDS. She personally doesn't have these experiences, but she does believe they are real. She doesn't have dreams or visions, but her husband, David, does. And at one point, she thought Chad could too. He asked if the only two people she knows who have visions are Chad and David, her husband. She said, no, there are other people, and it's not unusual. Pryor says at a number of these conferences and on podcasts, Chad said Tammy would die early. He actually brought this up at the conference Lori is at, according to Pryor. Gibb said she thought this was at conferences prior to meeting Lori between 2017 and 2018, but that's personally all she knows. He asked her to explain energy work. She says a practitioner that communicates with you or your body, they use a method through muscle testing and ask your body what's going on physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. And then they just find different ways to help you. He asked Gibb about vibrations, and she said the body has a frequency. It's kind of like music. It has different megahertzes that can have positive and negative effects in how they express themselves. She says she's not personally super familiar with it, but he said that you talked about vibrations in interviews. She said vibrations is an energy you have. It's a frequency you put off. He asked if frequencies give revelations. She said she doesn't experience that, but maybe other people do. She says light and dark teachings are inconsistent with the church's teaching. She said you could say Jesus is said to be the light of the world, so you could assume Satan is dark. He asked if she taught people about light or dark, and she says she may have, but she doesn't remember. He asked if she remembers talking to Detective Moffat about her not having the best memory and that she forgets things often. She told him she had a difficulty with dates and times and facts. Then he said, I know that's not easy to acknowledge. He really honed in on this for a hot minute, y'all. When Lori and Chad first met, he was there to sell books, and he tells Gibb, "You took a jab at writing books." She started her book in the middle of 2018 and finished it around the time she met Lori. The book was called To Feel the Fire, and it's about her religious experiences and her evolution in the LDS faith. Pryor mentioned she has spoken to a lot of officers, and she said a few. He names off a bunch she's talked to, and then he names Rob Wood. And he asks how often she spoke to Rob Wood. She said it was frequent for a short period of time. He moves on and said she did an interview with someone on TV and asked when that was. She kind of thinks for a second and she just doesn't know. She said it's been a long time. She does say Nate Eaton, and John Pryor said he forgot about that. Then she says Keith Morrison. She had a hard time remembering his name. How do you forget Keith Morrison's name? He asked if there were conditions in place in that interview that there were certain issues they would not talk about. She can't remember, but possibly. Then Pryor asked if Keith Morrison is a member of the LDS faith, and she doesn't know. He moves on and asks about communicating with Rob Wood. He said, "Would it surprise you to learn that between May 20th to November 4th of 2020, you and Rob Wood exchanged over 340 texts?" She said it's possible, but she doesn't know a number. He asked if in talking to Wood, she felt the need to protect a person or an organization, and if that affected whether or not she would testify. She says no. She wanted to tell what she knew about the case. He asked about the interview she did with Nate Eaton at East Idaho News and Dateline, and then asked if there were any conditions put in place for those. She doesn't think there were. He asked if the purpose of the interviews was to protect her church, and she said no. Pryor asked if there's a text between her and Rob Wood where there's mention of her and Keith Morrison wanting to protect the church. Gibbs said that was more in reference to make clear that what Chad and Lori were teaching was not mainstream LDS faith. Pryor says you sent a text to Rob Wood talking about Keith Morrison saying, "I want to make sure the church is protected. He has done a good job so far." And Gibbs said she felt comfortable talking to Keith Morrison. He asked, "Why are you sending that to a prosecuting attorney who is prosecuting Chad Daybell?" She said she just wanted to let Rob Wood know what she was doing. Then he asked if the 300 plus other texts between her and Rob Wood were just to say hi. She says no. He asked if the point of the text was to establish her testimony in the case and what she's going to say. Then Pryor says it's a coincidence you say you were going to protect your church. There's an objection. It was sustained. He asked about first meeting Lori. They met at a class where Gibb was teaching about health and nutrition and also preparedness ideas. Pryor moves on to ask about Lori moving around in January, February. And Gibbs said she moved around to different places in Arizona, and then in February, she went to Hawaii. Pryor asks about Gibbs' relationship with Tylee and says, "You two didn't care to be around each other." Gibbs said that wasn't true, just Tylee wouldn't talk to her. He asked how often she spoke to Lori in early 2019, and she doesn't remember. He asked if she is suffering from a case of forgetfulness, and she says no, it's just normal forgetting for her. She did say at the end of March, Lori went to live with Alex in Arizona. She's aware Lori got money from Joe Ryan's life insurance policy. Then Pryor asked how light and dark are not a part of the LDS faith. Gibbs says it's just not the way Lori and Chad were teaching it, and personally, she would never refer to anybody as light or dark. They talk about portals, and get this, y'all, Lori and Chad made the portal by praying. The portal was there so they could get answers. They also used it for cuddling, if you remember, through those text messages they sent to each other. Gibb wasn't super close to Chad, and Pryor points out she was trusting Lori's word when Lori would tell her things Chad said, and Lori may not be telling the truth because Lori's lied to her about other things, and Gibb agrees. She did not call law enforcement before recording that call with Lori and Chad in December. Pryor points out in that conversation, Lori referred to I a lot. The Lord needs me to do this. I had to move Tylee. He's pointing out there was nothing mentioned about we, meaning me and Chad. Pryor brings up her lying to the police about JJ and asked if she went to confess and clear up her initial lie. Gibbs said she did go tell them everything she knows, and that was a hard thing for her to do. He asked if her being there today was hard, and she says, of course. He says he knows she has information about JJ Vallow and what happened. Then she says that she has shared everything she knows about it. He kind of starts to ask if maybe Gibb and her now husband, David Warwick, had an affair, but there was an objection. There were a lot of objections for argumentative that were sustained. The Sunday Gibb was there in Idaho. She doesn't think anybody went to church, but David and Chad were going to look at some property. The people that ended up going were Chad, Gibb, her then boyfriend David, a realtor, and possibly Alex. She thinks Lori was home with JJ. The night JJ was last seen alive, she doesn't know where Alex put JJ, but her and David stayed in JJ's room, and Lori's room was down the hallway. On direct, she did say that there was a bed in Lori's room for JJ and he would sometimes sleep in there. But she assumed Lori laid down with JJ. They move into David Warwick having that nightmare he was very upset over. Gibb tried to get into Lori's bedroom for Lori to give him a blessing, but didn't get her. On direct, she tried calling and texting both Lori and Chad. She woke up around 7 a.m. and left around 9. She doesn't remember if she asked to see JJ that morning, but at Chad's preliminary hearing and at Lori's trial, David Warwick testified he did ask to see JJ. And Lori said that he was acting up and Alex took him. She will be back on the stand tomorrow. Nate Eaton tweeted out, somebody tried to serve Melanie Gibb with a subpoena to appear as a witness for the defense. The prosecution got wind of this, went outside and said, she's a witness right now. She can't be served with anything. So Pryor wants her to come on to the defense. I totally think he's going to try to implicate Melanie Gibb and David Warwick in JJ's death. Just a hunch. He's kind of been doing that since day one. So that's it for today. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We'll be back live tomorrow morning, so come join us in chat. Hoping to do a lunchtime live tomorrow since I don't have a track meet. So come see us. We have a good time. We have a good group. Lots of interesting chat about all the testimony. Until then, hope you guys have a good rest of your evening.